Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of TechCast, the podcast about Warhammer 40k and everything involved around it. Today I have a very special guest on from the Sisters Act podcast. Please introduce yourself now.
Hey everybody, my name is Mitch Beard from the Sister Act 40k podcast, and I believe we're here to talk about sisters.
That's exactly correct. We're here to talk about all things sisters. So let's begin. What is your podcast about a little bit? Can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, Sister Act 40k podcast has been around since, like about April 2020. I guess we could call it a pandemic project, maybe. But yeah, so I have been a Sisters player since about forever, starting from the third edition Codex and then onwards. So I have a whole lot of metal models running around my house, and Sisters Forever. There was not really a lot of content about sisters when I started the show because they had just gotten the new book and people were starting to get excited, but it was still quite the niche faction. So found this amazing human being named Rob Helton. We decided to start a show together, and we are a mono-faction exclusive podcast. We only talk about sisters. So sister strategy, sisters hobbying, the sisters lore. We've had some Black Library authors. If it's got to do with sisters, we'll talk about it. If it doesn't, you'll have to go somewhere else for your content. Very, very straight line definition.
And you mentioned third edition. From what I remember, because I think I started a Sisters Army back then myself, weren't they
Yeah.
called something else? I think they were Demon Hunters.
So the third edition sisters book was called the Witch Hunters Codex. That was when they were the Witch Hunters were the sisters and the Demon Hunters were the Grey Knights, and they kind of like rolled Inquisition elements into it. But it was largely Sororitas plus like some random stuff. Could put like stormtroopers in and assassins were in the book and weird things.
Okay, I think I remember right around that. It was right around the Eye of Terror campaign. Is that correct?
I think so. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. And the Witch Hunters book lasted. It was published in like late third, and it lasted until like mid fifth edition. It was like one of the longest running books at the time, and it held up fairly well before they replaced it with later a White Dwarf only for Codex, and then that was replaced with a PDF free download Codex. And the scariest thing in my career as a Sisters player was when Games Workshop released free PDF rules. Because if Games Workshop is not trying to make money off the book, it means they have no conviction in the product whatsoever. So that was kind of the darkest day for me. Not even the quality of the book, just the fact it was free was scary. And of course, now clearly they've changed their minds. So I'm very excited to be wrapping the faction now, 21.
Yeah, very much so, especially since I think they had the shortest running codex from 8th to ninth edition. In fact, when I started my sister series, I was like, oh, they just got a new codex. It must be a safe one to target. And I thought it was a really cool faction. And then obviously the AdMech and the Sisters came out right after I finished both. So, you know.
Yeah, we had like between the index, the beta book, the first codex, and the second codex, we had more codexes in the last 2 years than we had in like the preceding 15, probably. So it's pretty exciting.
It's definitely great to see when a faction gets some love and support. I mean, I remember when the AdMech came out, and I didn't really play that much back then, so I had a big break between 4th edition, I believe, up to 6th or 7th edition when I kind of came back for a short time, and then quit again and came back in 8th edition where I really got a love for the rule set and everything of that nature. So what kind of inspired you to start the podcast, I guess?
Yeah, so I tell you this the origin story, which is kind of funny. My personal origin story. So I had been to a couple major events in the past. Like I've done a couple of Nova Opens, which is an incredible tournament, by the way. And then I finally did my first LVO in 2019, like 2 months before all the lockdown started. And so LVO is incredible. Look, I'm a quote unquote competitive Warhammer player in that I like to go to competitive events, but I'm not anywhere near competing for top table. That's not why I go. I go because it's like an amazing opportunity to meet new people and build new relationships and meet old friends. It's just like a really cool social experience above all else. And so we go through the first couple of days, and on Friday, that Friday night, I get invited out to dinner with some people who I've met, over the internet on Discord or whatever. So we go to the Caesars buffet, and I sit down with a friend of mine at a table, and there's all these other guys who are like coming in and sitting at these kind of collection of tables, clearly all people who were coming from the LVO. And at this table, randomly, it just becomes the podcaster table. So no joke, there's like Mitch, random scrub, like random 3-2 scrub who's sitting at the table. And then without exaggeration, Val Heffelfinger, Peter the Falcon, We get Paul Murphy from Forge Narrative, who sits down. Adam Camilleri shows up and sits down, and then John Damaris, who at the time was just founded the Art of War podcast, are all at this table, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I literally have no reason to be here, and this is the coolest thing. And everyone was very nice and friendly and introduced themselves, but they didn't have to because I already knew all their voices. It was like this crazy out of body experience, and so I go back next day. I'm like, told my wife, my God, Katie, you won't believe like this insane night that I had. And she's like, just dudes who talk into microphones. You could do it. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you could totally do it. Just find some friend who wants to chat with you about Warhammer and give it a try. And that actually was what prompted me to do it. It was the combination of that experience and then my wife being like, just go do it. And then obviously from there it was, what are you going to talk about? Well, I only know one thing, but I know it really well. So I guess that's the topic of the show then. And I found Rob, and we decided to do it together. And the rest is recent history.
That's a really amazing story. I mean, it's
Pretty nuts.
yeah, I know the feeling. It's very surreal because I remember listening to Ricard Nilsson on other people's podcasts, and then he was my first guest on my show. So it was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm talking to this guy. I kind of remember only thinking I would hear on a different show. But actually, this is an interesting question. Usually, we at the end of the show ask about how can people get into competitive, but you did bring up your tournament experiences, and I think this is something that a lot of new players find intimidating, is getting into the tournament scene. How would you say is the best way for a new player to kind of approach their first tournament, or how can a player get into the tournament aspect of the game?
Yeah, so the way that you get into the competitive aspect of 40K, you find an event near you, you sign up, and you go to it. You create no additional preconditions or requirements on yourself to go to the event. That is the correct answer. So I'll back it up a little bit. The first tournament I ever went to of any size, like real GT level, mage level, whatever. The first one I ever went to, real tournament, was quite literally the Nova Open. So I walk into this room and I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be like. And I'm surrounded by literally hundreds of other people talking about blades and riptides. And this, cause it was the year of the Castellan monstrousness. And like all these people talking about my hobby. And I'm like, I'm in gamer heaven right now. Like I've never seen so many people with the same nerdy hobby as me all together having fun. And look, I tried my best to make a good list. I came in knowing my codex fairly well, so I wasn't going to spend all day like rifling through a book, which is just not enjoyable experience for anybody. But like, if you know your rules fairly well, you played a couple of games, just go do it because you're not trying to win. And that's the other thing people don't realize. 90% of people in that room are not trying to win. And of the remaining 10%, 7% are probably deluding themselves, right? People go because it's fun. It's like every game is like basically a speed dating round with someone who has a very, very cool shared interest as you. And it's like a 3-hour chance to meet someone over and over and over again. And it's just a really fun experience. You meet a lot of people that way. The best way to go to a tournament is just to go to a tournament without creating reasons why you can't. That's my advice.
And I think that's incredibly important for people to understand. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Is that they shouldn't be going there expecting to win or expecting to take down their first tournament. And I think this is something that kind of everyone who's been in the tournament scene has said to some extent. And I think that's incredibly important. And I guess in that same regard, let's say if someone's having a hard time in their first tournament, they're 0-3 or whatever, going into their fourth round, what would you say is the best thing for that person to do if they're maybe feeling a little bit on tilt, if they're maybe not sure about how they necessarily performed within that event, or if they should, how should they learn from that experience, I guess.
I So again, I think it comes back to the same point. Fundamentally, 40K, not just tournaments, but fundamentally 40K is a shared social endeavor. There are very few games out there which require you to spend 3 hours with one other human who you've maybe not met before. It's like a very unique social experience, right? And then do it over and over and over again. So what I always like to do is I always just ground my truth in that fact, right? What are my goals for this 3 hours? I want to have a good experience, and I want my opponent to have a good experience. Everything after that is derivative, right? Or secondary. So whether or not I'm 3-0 or 0-3, it doesn't matter because my game four, I want to have a good time, and I want them to have a good time. And maybe have a good time means play really tactically, play a really tight, clean game, play with intent and like really cerebral go at it. Like maybe that's how you want to have a good time when you're 3-0 and you're like pushing the event. great. That's a totally reasonable way to have a good time. But it's also to have a good time to just be social, roll some dice, do some stupid thing with some character charging you tonight and see what happens. Like if you're 0 and 3, just change the parameters for what you need to do to have a good time and just have a good time. It does like that's it. And you'll try to learn some stuff along the way, but that'll kind of happen organically too, as long as you're paying attention. Just make sure the social experience is good for you and the opponent, right? And then as long as you make that your objective, you know, it's harder to be upset because your goal is to not be upset rather than your goal is to win, which doesn't happen, get this, half the time for most people.
I don't believe you. I think
Yeah.
everyone can be a winner. um,
One person gets to be a winner at the Nova Open. They win 8 times and they win. Everyone else has to lose. So
Fair enough, fair enough. I guess so. With that being said, okay, so we kind of jumped a little bit forward there. Um, let's say with the new Codex out, and obviously there's a lot of complexity within the ninth edition rule set and with ninth edition Codex, codexes as a
sure.
whole. What would you say if someone just wants to get into the Sisters of Battle Army or the Adepta Sororitas? What would be their best way to approach getting into that army from digesting the rules of the Codex?
Sure. So most useful resource, I think, if you want to get into a new faction, especially one which has a fair amount of depth like the Sisters, would probably be to find other humans who are like really passionate about it. Find someone in your local area who's passionate about it. That's an easy way to do it. If not, there's a lot of online communities out there. There's a couple of invite, but like very easy to get into with 1,000-member Sisters Facebook groups. There's a really cool Sisters Battle of Discord that I cannot speak highly enough of with incredibly friendly, kind people. There's even podcasts out there that focus just on the Sisters of Battle. Like, I would suggest you find some community and then engage with the people in that community because just reading the book won't tell you actually a lot in terms of what's good and what's bad and what works and what doesn't, especially without that context. But humans are the reason I play this game. So go find those humans, and they will absolutely, almost all the time, be very excited to help you figure out this thing that they love and want to talk about.
No, 100%. No, sorry, I 100% agree on that. As well, because actually, a big way that I learned the Sisters of Battle before making my first series was I did watch, or I guess listen to, the Sisters Act podcast, and listening to
Hmm.
the way the guests talked about certain things and how you guys covered it really helped me kind of understand some of the more complex interactions within the army itself. Um, what would you say is maybe one misconception that a lot of people have about the Sisters of Battle that you would like to clear up within the community?
Ooh, a tactics misconception? What kind of misconception are you looking for? There's so many to choose from.
I guess a general belief that players might hold. There's always some kind of stigma with an army that the player population might have that might be unjust or might be unfair in one way or another, whether that's positive or negative.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit more the old book than the new book because the meta is currently, as of recording, being dominated fairly badly by Adeptus Mechanicus and also Drakari. But there's a bit of a Sisters OP mentality out there. Like, oh my god, they can guarantee their charges. Oh my god, Meltaguns are so broken. Those are very powerful abilities, and the book is a very powerful book. But it's also a deep book. It's not OP in the way that, like, there's this unit that is going to kill you and you can't kill it. Like Sisters can kill you, but they will die in droves while they're doing it. So I think that perception that Sisters are too powerful or OP is almost certainly wrong, especially with the new book. And if you're salty about it because you just got your butt kicked by the most loyal servants of the Emperor, that's okay. But recognize that they have ways to beat them, and there's ways to play against them, which can be very powerful, and to not worry about it too hard.
Hmm. Interesting. And what would you say, I guess, as a misconception, maybe from the people who play the army? Because obviously there are kind of things that develop over time. That people say, oh, well, you can't build an army without unit X, or you have to do thing Y. Is there something in the Sisters that you
Yeah.
would say needs clearing up on that end as well? Or,
So one beginner fallacy that a lot of people think is that power armor is good defense. Like I've seen a lot of posts online, especially on Facebook, say stuff like, "Oh my God, sisters are so busto because not only have multi meltas, they also have power armor. They're so hard to kill." Sisters are not hard to kill. They're like incredibly squishy actually because you're running these little 5 girl units around There's AP all over the place. They get picked up fairly quickly. So don't march up the field singing hymns to the, unbreachability of your power armor because it will then be breached. Sisters play a very tactical game with a lot of positioning and a lot of trading and a lot of forethought to play really, really well. Um, if you don't play that way, you will probably get handled. I would say is like the biggest misconception amongst newer players. Our armor ain't that good.
Yeah, I can imagine you guys only have a toughness of 3 from what I remember, correct?
It is not hard to wound the Sororitas, unfortunately. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess going on that train of thought, what would you, if you had to say, what would be the worst matchup for the Sisters of Battle, and what would be the best matchup in terms of armies?
So Sisters have the advantage of still being a very powerful book, powerful ninth book. I think they stand head and shoulders above almost all of the non-ninth books. So there's plenty of like factions which are currently quite weak, unfortunately, which is unfortunate, but how it is. So there's plenty of factions where we're probably very strong against. God help you if you're a Psyker faction right now without a ninth book. You'll not do very well into the Sororitas because they have a lot of anti-Psyker tech. As far as what scares me the most, I mean, I think that both Boogeymen are at a pretty rough place. Like Admech and Drukhari are both very, very scary. Between the two of them, I think Drukhari are probably still the scarier one for us. I'm getting a little bit tactical here, but Admech likes slinging around these 20 Skitarii bricks, which are almost impossible to kill in shooting because they can stack a million buffs and have like 0+ armor saves on 8-point models and assorted madness. But they're actually fairly weak to mass power weapon in combat, which Sisters have a lot of access to. So if you build your list properly, you have ways to pick up Skitarii bricks if you play well and if you build your list well. But like Drukhari just flying around in boats and having like you have a million units, they have a million units, but all their units kill your units without breaking a sweat. So Drukhari is still quite a hard matchup in that way. Beatable with their nerfs, but quite a tough matchup as well because they play in many ways the way the Sisters sometimes want to play, but like a lot better. So you have to do a different thing than what you usually do, and that obviously is a back foot kind of from the get-go.
Yeah, I can see that making sense. I mean, I've seen kind of a split opinion on the AdMech community of how bad or how good a matchup for against Sisters is for AdMech. So I can definitely see where you're coming from on that end, especially because Repentia and things like that can tear apart a large Skitarii block pretty consistently, and they're a nice big juicy target for the Repentia. But
Let me tell you this: 5 Zephyrim as Bloody Rose, backed up by Morven Val's full hit and full wound rerolls, picks up an average of 18 Skittles
oh geez,
through their 6-up invulnerable save, and that's a 90-point unit. So if you can land that, that is a huge momentum swing in your favor. But of course, they can also teleport, drop down, and rapid fire you to death. So it's a very interesting tactical game. But we do have answers to the Skitarii blob. You just have to be careful in actually like using them as answers.
yeah, I think a lot of people overestimate the durability of some of our AdMech units. And I've seen actually recently in the last event, a lot more people start bringing Cataphrons to counteract some of that, in addition to those
Yeah.
large blocks of Skitarii. So it's interesting to see how that army shapes up and how Sisters shape up over time. Are you looking forward to the Thousand Suns and Grey Knights Codex, considering they're both Psyker heavy armies?
I am so excited for those books to be good. Here's what I want. I want the Thousand Suns to come out and be like, our mind bullets are the best mind bullets, and I want them to knock AdMech out of the meta. I don't even know how, but let's just assume that they can do it. And they're the top dog, and that is the best day for us because there are so many ways to cancel brain bullets in the Sisters book. Um, Army-wide rules you just get without having to do anything for. You can do the most minimal of tech choices, like swapping out the hymn on a priest suddenly makes you invulnerable to smite spam. Like there's so many little things you can do. I want them to be amazing so we can. That's my goal.
That'd be pretty fun, actually. In fact, I would actually be kind of okay with that, simply because it might make Graya a playable Forge World, which I'm really rooting for, and
Mm.
unfortunately kind of got a bit of a nerf in this new Codex for Admech, so I guess that'd be kind of fun to see as well. Um,
I'd be okay with that because psychers are heretical and only to be purged. So there we go. Especially the Grey Knights.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they did do that one thing with the sisters in that one place.
For those of you who don't know what this is, it's very important that the whole world know this. So I'll bring it up every time I get a chance. In the 5th edition Grey Knights Codex, which was often looked upon as quite unfavorably as a over-the-top Mary Sue, we're the best kind of a book in terms of the fluff. There's one tiny little vignette on one little corner of a page that no one would remember unless they were a Sisters fanatic, where in this story, the Grey Knights were going into some evil demons of some kind, and they chose to slaughter a bunch of Sisters of Battle, cover their armor with Sisters' blood, which was so pure and holy and faithful that it provided an extra aegis against demonicness, which helped them then defeat the demons. So to this day, anytime my army slays a Grey Knight, I'm very pleased with that because it's just payback, man. Earned it.
To be fair, I'm cheering for you as well, because for AdMech players, the Grey Knights actually stole one of our moons of Mars, which is Deimos, and turned it into their personal weapons manufacturer, and they keep it under very tight control, so we lost something to them as well. It seems like they're not very
Some kind of
favorable.
garbage.
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
yeah, the Grey Knights just take and never give anything in return. Um,
I
for,
mean, they're psychers, strike one. They're abhumans because they're space marines, strike two. Why would you ever trust them under any condition? Urging only.
yeah, I wouldn't. But look, coming back to kind of a little bit of the Sisters Codex now, what would you say is the Holy Order that was the biggest winner of the edition? Not necessarily the one that's the best, but the one that's probably seen the most improvement or the most interesting potential going forward.
Cool. I'm going to give you two. Uh, the first, these are so both of these were never used in the old book, and both of them are now very spicy. So there's two good choices here. The first of these is Argent Shroud, which you are seeing very popularly now in Sisters lists. So Argent Shrouds, basically, you can move in advance and then shoot as if you were stationary, which means you can advance a multi-melta and then shoot at full range. And it also gives you one free reroll per unit when it fires or punches. So one free hit or wound reroll, which on a two-shot multi-melta is, good, especially when they can move so much faster as a result. The other nice thing is that Retributors, who are kind of a marquee unit, lost the ability to move and shoot without penalty. So now, if you want to hit on threes moving around, the only way to do it is Argent Shroud. So their stock went way up. In the old book, they were just garbage. And no one ever took them. So well done. But Sacred Rose, Argent Shroud was a bad order. Sacred Rose was like the lulzy, I can't believe this is even printed level of awful order. And in the transition to knife, it somehow got worse, which is impressive from its low starting point. Total trash pile. But the new book, Sacred Rose, got really, really interesting because they have a miracle dice regeneration mechanic where every time you use a miracle dice on a 4-up, you get another one back. Math on that basically says you get double your miracle dice over the course of the game because the ones you got back could give you more back, right? Like over and over again. So mathematically, you get twice as many miracle dice. And then they gave us a faction secondary where basically just using miracle dice gets you secondary points up to a maximum of 12. And if you're Sacred Rose, you basically guarantee a free 12-point secondary. And for Sisters, the third secondary traditionally been quite hard. So Sacred Rose is also very, very cool. Not as on the box powerful as some of the other orders, but the subtle ability to just like get 12 points for your third secondary is like a lot. That's like a lot of value. So I'm excited for both of those too.
It's actually very interesting because I think in the original Sister series, those two were the lowest two rated, and I think I put Sacred Rose slightly above Argent Shroud simply because of the number of rules they had, hoping that one of them might be actually useful. That's a little-
Yeah, I mean, like, what's worse, like the flaming dumpster or like the flaming trash can? It's like not really that interesting of a comparison.
Yeah, I know, and that's one thing I think is huge about Ninth Edition is a lot of these kind of unplayable factions, even Metallica and AdMech, jumped up a lot in usability and things of that nature. But inversely, what would you say is the biggest loser of the Ninth Edition Codex? I'm guessing it's probably going to be Bloody Rose simply because it's no longer the main faction. But let's say it's Bloody Rose. Let's say if it is Bloody Rose, what would be the second, like, kind of biggest loser in the sense that it kind of lost the most going from 8th to ninth?
And I think Bloody Rose lost very little on balance. Like, They still get an extra attack. They still get extra AP in combat, which is huge. They don't get extra AP on pistols anymore, which is sad for Seraphim. But and their tear them down stratagem went from +1 to wound to a hit of a 6 is an automatic wound. I actually think that's not a downgrade in the new book. It's like strictly downgrade if you look at the raw math of it. But when you consider how much access to rerolls a hit that we have a stratagem which just gives it on demand. We have Morphin Fall. We have other ways to get full hit rerolls. The math on that actually gets quite compelling. So I actually think that they took only a nerf in terms of their Seraphim, and I think internet complaining otherwise is largely incorrect. So I don't even know if I'd say there was a nerf there. Um, if there was a nerf overall, I'd say the biggest nerf to the book was losing advanced charge for one command point. Um, what that means is you used to have Repentia, which could jump out of a Rhino 3 inches, move 6 inches, advance 6 inches, charge 12 inches, and suddenly they went like 27 inches across the table to tear somebody apart. Losing advance and charge dropped that play strategy quite significantly. I would say that's probably the single biggest nerf to the book. But it's just what's actually happened is that power budget has been distributed elsewhere in the Codex. So now instead of having kind of a mono build, like 3 Retributors, 3 Repentia, now there's a flourishing variety of builds. And even this far along, we are nowhere near having solved or settled what the best list is in this book. And I actually suspect as the meta shifts over time, the best list, quote unquote best list, will change because the book has depth, which will give it lasting durability, into the future of Ninth. So I avoided your question horribly there. There's not a whole lot of things which took like a true like hit to the face to the point where they became awful. Other than like our hopes and prayers for Paragons versus their actual fact. But other than that, it's pretty solid.
Oh, the Paragons were a huge hit to me. I was really, really rooting for them to be a troop choice, and I knew it was highly unlikely, but I just really wanted that to be a reality.
I was rooting for them to be not 80 points a model. That would have been fine. I
That's
would
true
have
too.
taken 40, 50, 60 points. Yeah, that would have been fine.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. Well, hold on. To be fair, 80 points is way less than their original printing of 240 points, but way more than their 0 points in
Per
the app.
model.
Yeah, per model. It's like they just could not get those points to work correct in either of their versions of the rule sets for whatever reason. So,
Look, computers are hard. It's not like Games Workshop is a multi-billion-dollar company or anything like that. Just cut them some slack. Wait,
yeah,
what?
yeah. 240, 0, 80, whatever. Same thing.
Yeah.
um,
Emperor cares not for your numbers, only that you purge.
exactly. And
Die.
I do agree with you though on that on the point that you made there that it's a very deep book, and I think that's a really big thing because as we've seen with a lot of armies, the first mover strategy is not always going to be the best one throughout the edition. Necrons is another army I covered, and from when I started that series to kind of now where it's concluding, the top tournament lists are vastly different in design and scope, and they've kind of changed throughout that whole period. So that's something great to see that the sisters can do now, especially since their model line has increased, because I found that to be kind of stifling in the previous 8th edition book, was that your choices were kind of limited by variety to an extent. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, well, Sisters was always a small faction, right? Like, always and forever, really, you had Battle Sister model, which was your troops, and it was your elites, and it was your fast attack, and it was your heavies, just depending on what guns you chose to give them, right? Between Battle Sister, Celestians, Dominions, and Retributors. And then you had your Angels, your Seraphim. That was a different looking model. That was cool. And then you had like the crazy organ tank, like the Immolator. And like that was the whole range, really. No one ever built a penitent engine because that thing was an impossible thing to build, the old metal ones. You had to use like 4 million pins. So like the whole range was like 3 different sculpts, basically. Rhino chassis, infantry, flying infantry. Now we have so much more out there. We've got new kits that look similar-ish like Zephyrim, but then we have like entirely new kits, like new mortifiers, um the new penitents look incredible. We've got the new battle tank. We've got obviously paragons are gorgeous. We've got friggin' sacrosancts with halberds and shields. Like there's so much out there now that wasn't there before in terms of sculpt, which also has led itself to kind of new rules as well that we've never had before. Good time to be alive and playing Sisters right now, I can tell you that.
Definitely. I mean, I picked up a box of Sacrosancts myself and Morven Vol, I believe. What would you say is your new favorite model? I guess both aesthetically and rules wise out of the new models added to the range.
Oh, it has to be Vol. Like, when I was putting mine together, I had this moment because I've been playing Sister forever. I had this moment where I was like, I am assembling a gorgeous model, which is like a dreadnought basically. Like it's a dreadnought for the sisters. She's a character. Oh, also she's a High Lord of Terra. Like, and this is a model I'm putting together in my hands right now, like looking at all my old metal models across the desk, and I'm like, how far has this faction come? Like, how cool is this? Am I even awake right now? So all in on Vol. She's gorgeous. She's beautiful. Like, she's got a spear from the Custodes. Her pose is baller. She can stand next to Gulliman or a Baden and look equally badass, right? Which is unbelievably cool. And then her stack of rolls are just bonkers too. It's just absolutely bonkers. The things that she can do. She can shoot. She can punch. She can punch twice. Her monster full reroll buff makes units absolutely terrifying. Like I said, 5 Zephyrim killing 18 Skitarii without breaking a sweat. She just does so many cool things for the list. And then you can have her standing, just hanging around with some Saxons behind a wall, not being able to be shot on top of it. She's so good.
Yeah, she's definitely up there in terms of all of the new ones. I mean, the Paragon suits, like you said, look amazing, and she's no exception to that. And the Sacrosancts are fantastic as well. I think they are probably a little more interesting to me just because I love the halberdiers and maces, but definitely Morven Vol's up there as well. What would you say is kind of the biggest winner from the ninth edition Codex in terms of unit or model from rule sets?
Totally. Can I give you two answers? Is that allowed on the show?
Yeah, give as many as you like.
Because you gotta understand, I I co-host a podcast where we have one subject, so we talk forever. There are no upper limits to how much we can talk about a single data sheet, or else we run out of content and the show would die. So I'm very used to this. Maybe two. The first is the Dominion Squad. So in the old book, Dominions were quite poor. They didn't really have a great function. They could kind of like move 6 inches if they were on foot and shoot storm bolters, which were pretty bad even with blessed bolts, and then they would just die. And you're like, I'm not sure why I took you in my list. But new dominions. So a couple things changed. First off, their scout move now applies to their transport. So you put those girls in a rhino, and the rhino moves up 6. Then they can disembark and play games. That's pretty stellar. And they can bring friends in the rhino, so you can stuff that rhino with sacrosancts or multi-melter retributors or pencha or arcaflip, whatever you want, and shove those up the enemy's nose, which is amazing. And then the new Blessed Bolt stratagem just says every time you roll a 6 to hit, just do 2 mortal wounds. I gotta tell you, there's like a 65% chance if you get 16 shots from those Stormbolters at close range that you'll do 6 mortal wounds for 1 command point. That is fairly bonkers. Get reroll ones, it goes up to like an 80 something percent chance. That is a very, very efficient stratagem. And I just love them. It's gonna be hard not to play with at least 2 squads of Stormbolter Dominions in basically every list that I play for at least a while. If you want one more, well, I want to give you one more. Celis Queen is the other one who's just absolutely gone wild. So back when she was just poor old Celestine in the old book, and she was like this hybrid mediocre beat stick with like an okay invul boost buff that you took because it was the only way to boost invul to a 4++, but everyone was kind of like meh about her. New Celestine, you read her data sheet, she doesn't seem that different. But by putting the Gemini into the unit, you have to kill the Gemini before you kill Celestine, so they're not like a separate unit that flies around anymore. They can come back. She can heal herself with an action. She takes -1 damage to all the things that come in to hit her, so she's a lot more tough, deceptively tough there as well. And if she whacks you with her sword and hits you on a 6, you just take 2 mortals that way too. So she can just like randomly come in and like bonk 4 or 6 mortals and just like kill a bunch of stuff. She is just a monster right now. Um, Playing Celestine, she's my new favorite unit in the book, actually. Or my favorite old unit in the book because she's just got so much utility, does so much work every game. She's my other big winner, I'd say. Celis Queen for life. Or get
Ex-
out.
Excellent. No, I definitely the Celestine model is absolutely beautiful as well, and seeing the Gemini get a little bit of that boost is great too.
Yep.
And I 100% kind of anticipated the Dominion answer because I saw them and I saw Blessed Bolts. And I was like, holy crap,
Yeah.
what's it called? I can't believe it does two mortal wounds now, and then you consider you have two shots per Artificer Stonebolter, and then doubles in half range, which is 12 inches. And so I 100% agree with you. One thing I'm kind of surprised you didn't mention, and I'd like your opinion on this, is the Dialogus.
Oh, I mean, first off, I tried to limit my answer to respect your show. If you want me to list 10 more, I got you, buddy. Uh, no, I think the Dialogus got a lot better in that she was have a clear role before. Like the Triumph was a very good unit in the old book, and all she did was one part of what the Triumph did, and it was not obvious why you would take her other than cheap character that you could maybe put a relic on or something. Uh, I like the new book Dialogus more. People are definitely enjoying her, but I'm seeing a lot more Dogmatas than Dialoguses right now in the sisters lists. So I'm not as hot on her because like they made the Dialogus are really cool. They made her a priest. She can shout hymns now, and then like, but also we have this other one which is maybe better. So she didn't quite rise to the level where she's making many of my lists at the moment.
Yeah, I did notice that in a lot of the top end lists, but I do think it's great to see how much the Dogmata has improved. But I do think, or sorry, not the Dogmata, the Dialogus. And unfortunately, the Dialogus model for me looks way better than the Dogmata model, but what can you really do?
If you want to do a most improved, old Dialogus model to do new Dialogus model has to be the most improved because that old thing is kind of comically bad, and the new one she's like super cool, standing in front of a floating pulpit, shouting her head off. Yeah, that's a big change for me.
I don't know, there's something charming about the old one, the old Scream style art.
I mean, I still have one. I painted her. I run her sometimes. She's a great fun. No, she's not quite as good looking as the new plastic.
Of course. Yeah, I think she's actually probably rated for one of the worst models, the old one, out of all of
Yeah,
40K.
but that makes me love her all the more. There's no better way to make me love something than for everyone to hate it, which is part of why I play Sisters in the first place, because everyone told me they were trash garbage when I first started in third edition. I was like, well, thank you for choosing for me. So I'm always one for the underdogs.
I can definitely see that. I mean, it was definitely not an army that was particularly powerful for a long time, and seeing them kind of rise to the point where they are now is very impressive. Um, Speaking of which, I guess before we go on to the next topic, um, or I guess this would be the next topic. What's your opinion of underdog builds for competitive play? Obviously, there's in a lot of games there's this kind of mentality of medalists, and a lot of people like bringing their medalist. But there's also the rogue builders who like to build sort of a rogue list that's unique or utilizes certain units that aren't common. And I think there's always kind of people on both sides who take it kind of a bit to an extreme. What's your view for yourself in terms of like building rogue and trying out new things, and how much of that do you mix between copying what's kind of successful and what's maybe something new and innovative?
I kind of want to sidestep and ignore your question, but if I say why, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. All right. Here's why I'm going to ignore your question. I don't think the Sister Book is anywhere near solved yet. I don't think we found the best combos. I don't think we found the best army list. I don't think we found the best use of the orders. I think right now, if you look online at the meta lists, I don't think there are meta lists, first off, because that implies some level of solved or best, which I don't think we're at. But the list most commonly being trialed right now are Bloody Rose Argent Shroud hybrids, which feel powerful, and I'm also playing around with them. Uh, I would say right now, if you think something is cool, you should try it because you might find that thing that no one has found yet, that proves to be amazing, that just took a while to figure out. So I would say don't even presume there's a quote meta build to be off meta from. Just go have a good time, try some stuff, put ideas on the table, see how they fare, be honest about what works and what doesn't work. Be critical in your self-assessment, but like go out and try stuff because I don't think we're anywhere near solved. I think it's going to take a while, and I think the book has way more depth than to assume that we found anything meta this early on. Is that a reasonable way to ignore your question?
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I totally agree with that. I kind of take a more of a mixed approach to it, whereas I say if you're a new player, maybe copy the kind of lists that are doing well at first, and then see where you would like to alter them, and see what you would like to make work within those lists. At least that's how I usually view it. But I definitely agree with you that we've had maybe what 2 tournaments, 3 tournaments, and there isn't quite enough data yet. We'll probably see completely different lists in the next month or so. But that being said, what would you
Yeah,
say is the most heretical thing you would like to make work?
I say Paragons. Paragon war suits. Because they're so beautiful. They're just so pretty. They're sisters dreadnoughts. I've wanted them since forever. And they're like not amazing. All right, so I'll give you two things. Paragon warsuits is one. I'd love them to be good. The best thing I've come up with for a Paragon warsuit, and actually this isn't even mine. I've stolen this from someone smarter than me. The best idea I've heard about Paragon warsuits so far is, you take 3 of them with multi-meltas and you outflank them. You strategically reserve them. And when they come in on a flank, you bring them in turn 3 after the battle's whittled down what's left on the table to like a fairly minimal thing. You bring them in a flank, blow up a tank because tanks are typically things carrying the weapons that kill that kill paragons. You blow up a tank with the multi-meltas, you hose down some screens with the bolter fire they have, and then you miracle dice guarantee charge something. Maybe that's enough damage, and then they're resilient enough off the back of that Alpha Strike to survive the rest of the game, in which case they're an amazing bully unit that just crushed a flank and turned the tide for you. That's the best version of them that I can come up with. I think they probably want to be Valor's Heart, because just double down on their 2-up save, and then ignoring AP makes a 2-up save even juicier. So I think that's the build I'm most excited, the unit I'm most excited to see work. The other thing I want to see is 30 Sacrosants be a thing. Like, as much as I said earlier, like, sisters are not durable, don't pretend that they are. I actually really want them to be, like, in my heart. And like, if 30 Valor's Heart Sacrosants can actually survive mid-table and just defiantly stand athwart the heretics, and hold ground and then halberd the crap out of anything that gets too close, I would love that to be a build. Unfortunately, if you run the math on Skitarii shooting into them right now, it's like they kill infinite of them, basically, from their 20 model Skitarii blobs. So I would avoid them for now. But again, don't avoid them for now. Ignore me. I'm an idiot talking head. Throw them on the table. Prove me wrong. Go win an event and turn the meta around. But those are the things which in my heart, I want to be good. New book.
Yeah, I'm with you with that 100%. I mean, I like building elite armies, and for me, Death Guard looked like an army I would love to play if they didn't look all rotting and gross looking. So,
Disgusting. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, paint them easy. This is my perfectly painted Death Guard, which is what we call a horrible paint job anywhere else. I'd covered it in Agrax.
Just prime them and slap some green on them. They're good to go.
Pretty much. Pretty much. I do like the Death Card and the Heresy color scheme, though, with the white, and then they make it all gross. That I could get behind. That's cool.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, their demon engines do look pretty nice, like the Mephitic Blight Hauler and the Plague Burst Crawler.
Yeah.
Those actually look pretty sleek.
Plague Burst Caller is a friggin' chonka hunk.
Oh yeah.
That thing just doesn't die. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did the heavy support video for Death Guard a little while ago, and I was looking at it. I was looking at the Plague Burst Crawler compared to the Predators, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this stat line so ridiculous compared to like a Land Raider?
Then it's doing like 3 plus D3 damage for some reason. Like, and then it's just picking up your rhinos, and you're like, what? What just happened?
Well, D3 plus
You
3 off.
fire a bunch of melters at it, and it's like, I made all my saves. Sorry. 5 up for the win.
Yeah, well, that's D3 plus 3 on its secondary weapons, which has 2 las cannons
Yeah.
mounted on the sides, and then it has a ignore line of sight cannon on its back. It's absolutely absurd. So what about Holy Order? What's like a Holy Order that might not be very popular that you want to make work, even if you don't think it's the best option, but like something you would like to kind of force through? Like for me, it's again Agrippina and Admech or Graia that I just want to like force and make work one day, but I know it's not quite as good as Lucius, for example.
So again, I don't think any of this is solved yet. I think we're still experimenting. I predict that Part of Our Martyred Lady may actually be pretty good. We're gonna get a supplement soon, I believe. Like one of the Warzone books, which is gonna give some Order of Our Martyred Lady stuff. So this might be like, duh, they're amazing now. For anyone who's listening to this in like 3 weeks, I don't know. But I think Martyred Lady is almost there. Like the book has a lot less miracle dice than it did, but we have a miracle dice secondary, which is incredibly strong. Order of Martyr Lady units give up Miracle Dice when they die, so that gives you access to the Miracle Dice to guarantee that 12 secondary. Again, this game is about scoring points, so scoring points that your opponent can't really prevent is real good. Other faction ability is that when you hurt them but don't kill them, they get +1 to hit. Very good on multi-meltas. They can move and still hit on 3s, which is pretty amazing. The Junith is a great character. She gives a cover save aura, which is really, really strong. Sisters with 2-up saves are really quite tough for those basic battle sisters. It's like right there, man. There might be a build already, which is incredible. We just haven't found yet. And it might just be those tiny bit of extra rules put it right over the edge. And I would like that to be true. Because they're kind of like literally like the box art version of the sisters. And it would be nice for the actual faction for the box art to be like also good. Be cool.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I was looking at them earlier today. Do you think there's any potential, I guess, mismatch in their Holy Order conviction that one part of it wants you to take small units while the other part of it wants you to take larger units due to the buff for having missing models within a unit?
Yeah, that's certainly a tension which exists. The thing I'd say is that sisters units, as much as they aren't durable, like you can't expect them to survive. The 6-up invulnerable save, if they're 2-up in cover, sometimes they just like do. So if you have like that 1 or 2 random models left, maybe you took the Hospitaller so you can regen some back. Under those conditions, like it's unlike you can't base a plan around it, but it's going to happen like once or twice a game where you're like, oh, they're still around. And being able to get a utility out of them is actually potentially pretty neat. So I'm okay with that. I would still buy towards building MSU and getting them killed and getting Miracle Dice, because Miracle Dice are very powerful when they're just scoring you points for using them. But the fact that I lean that way doesn't mean the other thing's not useful, because it just randomly is. You know?
Yeah, makes
Sometimes
sense.
charge a giant dreadnought into your 5 girls and like 2 of them walk away. And one of those has the multi-melta. And you're like, well, I know what she's doing next turn, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not a bad perk to have. So you think it's more of a side perk to have than something to focus build around, in that sense, right?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Their strategy is kind of neat, like +1 to wound a model which kills a character of yours. They get real mad about it. I think that's actually potentially very powerful. Like fling your canoness into Mortarion and suddenly your army's real mad about it. Like I think there's real juice there too. Like I said, I think it's like right there. I think it's like right on the cusp. And either this build right now or a couple of rules, that could be it. Also, Junith is incredible. She's a really good character as well. So.
Yeah, I think in the past I said if well, in the previous codex, it was that Bloody Rose and Valorous Heart were kind of the two main orders, and then Order of the Martyred Lady at the time was being held up by Junith. So it's good to see that she's still a very viable character. Um, in that sense, I guess, would you say Sisters are trending more towards an MSU build? And for those who don't know what that means, it means multiple small units. Or would you say they're trending towards more of a large unit build, sort of like we saw with AdMech, which went from 5-man Skitarii units to 20-man Skitarii units and Necrons and I guess Orcs?
So I would say by and large, we're seeing a lot of MSU. Primary reasons for this. Turns out 10 Zephyrim or 9 or 10 Repentia will kill nearly anything you point them at, which we learned from the old book. Turns out 5 of them buffed by Vol, or just like 5 of them going into most non-crazy durable targets, will also pick up nearly anything. So like why, and then die immediately, right? So like why send 10 models to a job when 5 will do? Especially if you have like the buffing power in the command phase, so they can go on adventures and still be very powerful. They kill something, they have obsec, etc., etc. So I think MSU is still probably more the way than not. We also have access to Ward of the Emperor now, which gives out a fight last and also turns off invulnerable saves once per game. And I can tell you that one of the big problems is, you charge them with 4 units and then, well, they interrupt and kill all of them. But if you have a fight last, that also makes it much easier to dogpile on someone getting into your lines and kill them anyway, especially if they're relying on an invul to stay alive. And the last thing I'd say is there's kind of an excitement for 20 model Battle Sister bricks because now you can put a stratagem on them if they're on an objective for 2 CP to give them transhuman and let them fire their bolters to max range. The transhuman is the more interesting part of that. You can stack a 6-up field no and a 4-up invulnerable. Like you can put a lot of defensive buffs on those girls to be much more durable. I am not convinced yet that that's not just a lot of resources to do a thing which isn't too crazy impressive. But again, new book. We have not solved it yet. Go prove me wrong. So I'm biasing to MSU. Maybe someone walks out with 40 Battle Sisters and 2 units and 30 Sacrosanct and wins a GT. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm interviewing you on the show. You could tell me why I'm wrong. So yeah, I'm excited to find out either way.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed is whenever I say something, oh, this is good or this is bad, someone ultimately wins a tournament with what I said was bad, and someone gets crushed with it. Warhammer's full of surprises, so I always make
Get wrecked, talking heads.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I always make a disclaimer in all my videos. It's like, this is my opinion. Obviously I can be proven wrong, and things change because it's not only your army that changes, it's also sometimes the meta. And speaking of the meta, do you think part of what's making Sisters so good right now is the fact that so many things are trending towards larger units, so that ability to output firepower from, let's say, a big block of Skitarii is sort of wasted on a 5 unit of Sisters or other targets, but at the same time, because everyone has these big units and orcs are coming out and then the psychers are coming out, your Repentia and things like that have a much bigger pool of targets for like juicy targets. Because I know if there's a lot of MSU, the Repentia might have a hard time finding the proper unit to kind of tunnel into and destroy before they go down.
Yeah. I think in general, the ninth books do a really good job playing ninth edition. And maybe that sounds like a tautology, but I think it's largely proven to be true that they're by and large just much better at the new game than the 8th edition books are. And you'll get your codex eventually. You can't all be sisters, people. But I think like being able to play MSU, also having the new buffs that we've gotten in the book to take those MSU units and shred large expensive units, give us a lot of opportunities to trade up, trade small units for big units, low impact units for high impact units. So I think in that way, it's very compelling to play the book. And I think when, if, when, whatever, Games Workshop takes AdMech down a peg, there's not obviously a reason to take Sisters down a peg or like obviously a problem in the book. I think just in general, there's a lot of pieces that are strong. So I think like once the shooting of AdMech is not completely monster bonkers, we'll be just fine into that too. And we just play the mission really well. We play the mission well while remaining very killy. Those are like all wonderful things to be. Our only real problem is we don't have a lot of great long range shooting. But again, small board, playing hard for objectives, that's usually not a big deal either.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I do agree with you a bit that AdMech probably needs a little bit of a nerf to some of its shooting. I mean, Iron Striders are ridiculous, and so are the Flyers, so a little undercosted.
Games Workshop, literally a guy named Tech Priest is owning this one.
Yeah. Well, I
Pay
mean,
attention.
all of my AdMech guests have said the same thing, that these 2 units are undercosted. It's, you look at the other options in the Codex, it's just like, oh, geez. Iron Strider, 75 points for, what, 2 last cannon shots at Assault, profile, and everything else? Okay. Oh.
I actually think that Sisters dodged a bullet here because we came out right after Dakar and right before AdMech. Like these two busto books with like us kind of in the middle, like just good book sandwich. I think actually like if the Sisters book had been busto and everyone was like, oh, so OP, I hate playing Sisters, that would actually be very depressing for me. Like I want to roll up to the table, play my favorite faction, be like, yeah, let's have a great game, right? Now like, oh, I guess I lose now. That's not really, like I said, Warhammer for me is about the shared experience. If my faction is intrinsically a poor shared experience, that would be like very anti what I'm all about. So I'm quite happy that we kind of dodged that one. And we just got a really good book instead.
Yeah, no, I agree, and especially for like new players. I mean, if you get the broken codex, by the time you paint up your army and everything, what you painted up might not be good anymore, and sometimes they over nerf or overcorrect. And luckily, it seems like they're taking a more conservative route towards corrections. So, looking at Drakari, it doesn't seem like they've nerfed them that much, but at least it's taken them down to a certain level of power where they're still good, but not necessarily oppressive.
There was a guy in my local meta a few years ago who was a really committed diehard Iron Hands player. Like he played Iron Hands like I played Sisters. He had like model chains on all of their arms, and he had like an Iron Hands like Questora's Dreadnought with like chains all over it. Like it was absolutely the most stunning, beautiful army. And he won best painter like everywhere he went. And then the Iron Hands book happened, the 8th edition book, and he just like went from being like a middle of the pack player who won best pace to like casually winning all the events. And so for a few months we were like, he earned it. He's a true fan. It's fine. But then after a few months we were like, can you just not anymore? We're all kind of done with it. And I felt bad for him at that point.
I fully get that. I mean, it's nice when the underdog wins for a while, but it is obviously an issue when something becomes too oppressive in the meta. And unfortunately, it seems
Yeah.
like Drakari and Admech kind of hit that nail a little bit. But it does seem like at least Games Workshop is keeping a very dynamic approach to their game, which I'm happy about, and what made me really like Ninth Edition as a whole.
I mean, for those of you who are fairly new to Warhammer or have bad memories, like 10, 15 years, like if a faction was busto, you just had to deal with it for like 4 years until the new Codex came out. Like 5th edition Grey Knights came out and they were busted. They were just like bonkers good. Like these crazy dreadnoughts, we called Cyphelman dreadnoughts, and just like there's nothing you could do except wait 3 years and hope the next book wasn't busted. They never patched it, they never changed points, they never changed the rules. So the fact that this now happens to create a healthy meta is so good for the game. And I think a lot of why this game is still so fun to play, even at competitive level, is because the meta does change all the time. It might feel like it doesn't, like you're stuck playing the same friggin' thing over and over and over again, but actually the meta shifts fairly regularly once you get past like the perceived internet griping of like hot takes version of the world.
No, 100%. I mean, looking at the one big thing I do is I look at top four lists just to kind of base my opinion off a little more, especially when starting a faction series. And the lists that are popular in the first like quarter, let's say, aren't the same lists that are popular in the third quarter, even if it's the same even if it's the same faction, for example. So it's nice to see that change. Well, one thing I guess I would criticize Games Workshop, and I'd like to get your opinion a little bit on this, is do you think they're approaching the way they update their rules correctly, or is it more where? So I guess one complaint I've heard was that a lot of people don't like that the supplements are coming out. They're only valid for a short time. They're they're full cost books for what essentially boils down to 4 pages of rules. And we recently saw Chapter Approved come out as a $40 book. And if you're a Death Guard player, it basically said no changes. If you're a Tau player, your Riptide went down by 1 point.
Yeah, I mean, look, I first off, I'm a bit of an apologist. It's very hard to build things and make things. Games Workshop is making an incredible thing, which is like creating this game that we all share and enjoy and podcast about and make friends with. I think like that's my baseline. Like none of this happens and we don't ever get to talk with one another unless they put out this thing into the world. And it's much easier to criticize it than to make it. So I try to keep that kind of in mind. I would say that if they were doing digital books with like regular updates, the way that your apps on your phone get regular quality of life updates and improve over time, I think that probably is a better world than this book heavy one. So I would like that to be true. I think the rate at which they change is fine. Like I can imagine you change points once every 6 months, but any faster than that is kind of ignoring the fact that people have to like buy models because of their rules and then assemble them and paint them and love them and take them to an event. And it kind of sucks to have that change on you before you even got to put them on the table. So I appreciate them wanting to be a little bit slower than probably a lot of competitive players want when it comes to tweaking rules because of the hobby aspect of it, which is where they actually make all of their money. But yeah, I think digital books would be nice. The one other thing I'd say is that Psychic Awakening I thought was actually pretty incredible when you go back and look at it, right? They had all the 8th books that came out and that created an ever shifting meta where every new book would just change the meta. And so it was always different and evolving. And then Psychic Awakening was great because it just kept doing that. Like some of the supplements were duds, fine. But like a lot of the supplements were amazing. Like the Grey Knights one was incredible. The Custodes supplement made them play very differently. The Knight supplement gave them a big hit. The Space Marine supplements did a ton of work, obviously, on top of the second books that they got. Like all those factions that got supplements, or a lot of them, really warped the meta again and kept it fresh. Like people say they want balance, but actually they don't. Because if you had a perfectly balanced game that never changed, you would all just quit. So like having that happen is really nice. The problem, of course, is COVID happened and, the world went upside down and they got all these books in the pipeline they got to publish. So they're doing like simultaneous releases of the Warzone book and the Codex, like is happening with Sisters now. And I think that is entirely an artifact of pandemics make it hard to run a business, not a business strategy to grub money from you. And I feel bad about that. So generally, I'm an apologist. Sorry, not sorry, but I do agree with you that like some of the books, especially like the chapter proof stuff, if that was just a more consistent quality of life tweaking in like some digital format, would probably be a better world for us to live in.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you on pretty much everything there. I do think it's unfair when people think that it's Games Workshop just trying to get money out of you in nefarious ways. I think usually it's just incompetence, if anything. And more so, I think the criticism should be aimed towards how can they improve the system of getting those rules in the hands of players
100%.
versus on them just being free or something of that nature. One thing I would love
100%.
to see is something like if you own the Codex and you subscribe to the app, you get the 4 pages for your Codex for free, for example, because then you're paying through it for the app. Obviously, there's issues with
Or at
that,
least
but
the rules pages should all be free, right? You should just
yeah,
get those.
exactly. Like the fluff and stuff, I fully support them putting in a book and selling at full price because that's just non, it's not nothing that you need for the game. It's nothing you need to play your army. It's something you can just kind of pick up as a collector's item. And I buy old codexes and things of that nature just to have it as a collector's item, more so than like a rules thing. And I love having the codexes on my bookshelf. So I support that aspect of it.
I've got my Witch Hunters Codex next to my I like, my bound White Dwarf Codex across these 2 episodes next to all my other sisters' books in a line. And I gotta tell you, I do go back and I'm like, I don't need that second edition sisters book. I do want it. And one day I'm just gonna pull the trigger and buy the damn thing. Even though I never play that edition, just to have it in the collection.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Um,
it's fun. I mean, I don't blame Games Workshop for wanting to make nice books. I just, like you said, I wish they just gave the rules out at least.
yep.
Yeah, made it a little easier.
Totally.
So yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people overreact to as well. They're Games Workshop's greedy, etc. It's like, well, they're probably just trying to find a way to make this work, and they don't have a good system. I mean, we saw what they did with the app initially.
May I get in a soapbox for a minute on your show?
Yeah, of course.
Opine. All right, so here's my little soapbox rant about Games Workshop being greedy. There's this like very common line that you'll see on the internet and on social media. People comment like, "Oh, Games Workshop made this unit really good, just would sell a lot," and then they're gonna nerf it when you buy 3 of them because they're just in it for the money. And that drives me crazy because, like, yeah, Morven Vol is a great model and everyone bought one, but like, Aragons are hot garbage. Like, people may have bought them because they were excited, but I mean, maybe they're great, and I just haven't found out yet. But they, at first glance, appear to be quite depressing. They do not appear to be pushed to maximize sales in the rules. Astrid Thurga, this like super cool Reliquinted Arms character model, you look at her data sheet, you're like, what? And then you don't buy her because it's like she's just a total mess. You look at the entire Primaris range for the first 18 months of their existence in 8th edition was terrible, and no one took them, and that was the marquee line. So I think actually what happens is like there's a hard game to balance. Probably impossible actually to properly balance it. And game structure just screws up a bunch, and sometimes in the good way, sometimes in the bad way. But we only remember the times we get Games Workshop screws up and that unit beats us in the face. We don't remember all the units that never make the table. So that's just my little diatribe against Games Workshop is just trying to make money. I mean, they're a company. You want them to make money, or else we don't get to play the game anymore. But I don't think they're doing it that cynically in that way.
Yeah, no,
All right, off my
100%.
soapbox. Here's your show back. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, Astrid Thurga and Dolan, whatever her name is, were one of the units I mentioned to avoid in the new sister series, even though all the other characters are great. And I think those models look fantastic. Same with the Paragons. I was actually kind of upset they were as weak as they were. Um,
Keep reading that data sheet, and I'm like, what are you trying to do? Why are you make any list at any point? I don't have an answer. Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But again, I also understand that sometimes they get the balance wrong, obviously. I think the biggest example of it was the AdMech boats, which was the Dune Rider and Disintegrator. But even then, when they nerfed them, people cried, the sky was falling, the sky is falling, and then they still saw
Yep.
play as 3 ofs in every single list. And I was
Yep.
like, okay, well, that was just an oversight. Like, they could have released them in that form as well, and they still see play even
Yep.
after another nerf. Um,
Strength hits indirect fire. People are gonna love it. Like they're gonna do it. So,
Oh yeah,
which is
100%.
what it is.
I mean, it's the only way of getting it really in AdMech outside of the Fusilier, which can just fly so far that it can actually kind of avoid, or I guess the Stratoraptor as well, but they can kind of just because of their mobility, but they don't actually ignore line of sight.
Mhm.
I guess, but speaking of like kind of bad units within the Sisters Codex, what would you say is the unit that went down the most in power in the Sisters Codex from 8th to ninth edition?
Which is not a bad unit. The Repentia, at least in lists I've seen. It used to be like you load up Battle Scribe and you'd put 27 Repentia in your list and at least 2 Rhinos and be like, okay, now what do I want my list to look like after you did that? Now I am seeing a lot of lists that don't run them at all. In the lists that do run them, there's this weird tension now where you want them in Rhinos to stay protected and get additional distance from the disembark, but the Repentia Superior wants them to be on the table to receive command phase buffs. So I think there's a bit of a tension there in terms of how you use them. There's also, like Sacrifices are a thing. Zephyrim got moved to fast attack, so they're easier to put on the table. So I think while they are still a very powerful unit, and you should still be scared of them, heretics, they're nowhere near the dominant. And they lost advance and charge, of course, from the army-wide stratagem. So I think they are nowhere near the boogeymen that they were in the eighth book. And again, I think this is good. I think the power budget went elsewhere, and I think they're still a great unit choice. Just they're now like an A minus, like everything else, not like a S tier unit that you have to take 27 of or you're an idiot. So that would be my pick for most dropped unit from the stratospheric level down to like a good unit.
That's fair enough. I mean, it does seem like they're seeing less play, but they are still definitely seeing play within top lists. Instead of like you said, being a 27 of, it's one squad, maybe two
Yep.
squads along those other choices, which is really good because it gives diversity in list building. What's your opinion on the Seraphims? Because they lost Deadly Descent, or they didn't lose Deadly
I
Descent, but
friggin' love them. Friggin' love Seraphim. I love them more than I did in the old book, and I was a Seraphim stan in the old book too. Don't overlook these girls. All right, soapbox time. Uh, they lost the ability to extend their range on Deadly Descent, which means you can no longer fire Meltaguns when you drop in from Deep Strike, and you can no longer fire Flamers out to 18 inches. Firing Flamers out to 18 inches is sad because it was nice to roast things beyond the screen, because it's very hard to hide from an 18-inch Deep Striking gun. No one good was deep striking inferno pistols and shooting things. Like the mythological, I drop it and I shoot a tank. Most of the time, the tank is screened, so you're not shooting a tank. And the rest of the time, 4 melta pistols with no rerolls does not a tank kill. So that like wasn't really a loss. The only real nerf that I think Seraphim took, honestly, I think it's a buff because then people weren't thinking they could do it and then building bad lists and playing them poorly. It's like the noob trap is gone. Um, but the real loss was losing AP from Bloody Rose, which is, sad. But let's talk about what Seraphim got instead. Uh, Hand Flamer Seraphim as Ebon Chalice have a stratagem. Basically, on a wound roll of a 4+, you just like do a mortal wound, which roughly translates to for 1 CP just do 3 mortal wounds with a Flamer unit. Gotta tell you, 3 mortal wounds on 1 CP on tap on a fast moving unit like that can come in from Deep Strike. That is a lot of value. With Blessed Bolts, you can just like randomly do Mind Mortals to things. There's like a ton of value in there. In addition, this is not something a lot of people think is true. So this may prove to be bad advice, but I am currently enjoying Argent Shroud Seraphim with Inferno pistols. You don't put them in Deep Strike because again, that's a noob trap. But you put them on the table, they move 12 plus in advance, and they're still firing their Melta pistols. That's a lot of value for 90 points. Like, they'll go score you an engage or blow someone on an objective and hold it. And then also 4 Meltaguns with a reroll is remarkably more reliable than just without any rerolls. I've been enjoying them a lot. Um, Also great action bots because not only are they fast and they can do the new Retrieve Octarius data secondary, or they can do banners, or they can do engage. They also have a strategy they can go back into Deep Strike now and come down the turn after. Again, sometimes you'll just like have a model or two that are still alive. You take those Seraphim, you're like, oops, I'm gonna score 5 more points in 2 turns. There's nothing you can do about it. I think their utility's gone up. I think the number of ways to use them has gone up. And I don't think we're done even figuring out the ways to use them. I am very hot on Seraphim right now. I will happily build a 30 angel list, 3 Seraphim, 3 Zephyrim, and go to town with it and do some work.
interesting enough. I mean, yeah, for me it was mostly what the loss on the pistols from Bloody Rose, as you mentioned, the AP on there. But also, one thing I wanted to do with them is, like you said, with the Ebon Chalice was take, because I think I did the math on it, you roughly can get your maximum of 3 wounds from one Seraphim with twin hand flamers. And
Just
then,
about, yeah.
yeah, like it's a little messy, but it's close enough. And then being able to deep strike them, generate 3 mortal wounds, and have the Inferno pistol on the other Seraphim. But yeah, 2 hand flamers is fine as well, I guess.
Just take the hand flamers, man. Because don't forget, you can shoot on the drop and then shoot in the shooting phase. Like 8d6 hits. Now it's strength 4 because all sisters flamers got a strength buff of 1. Hand flamers, and heavy flamers. Man, 8d6 strength 4 hits ain't nothing. That's gonna do some work.
It's true.
And it's like 90 points for the unit. I'm a big fan. Even if they're not Evan Chalice, I'm a big fan.
Makes sense. I mean, that's definitely also something to consider, considering how many large squads there are of like 20 basic troops that are kind of a little squishy. Because at the end of the day, if Scutari aren't benefiting from, the multiple buffs that you can stack on them, you can definitely put a lot of damage onto a squad, though screening is always kind of an issue. Um,
Seraphim also gained an attack, which is something not a lot of people talk about. They're now based 2 attacks, and the superior has 3. So she's now a pretty good caddy for a power sword. That's 3 attacks or 4 attacks on the superior for Bloody Rose. 16 attacks from a 5 chump unit, plus all the bolt shots as Bloody Rose is a thing. That'll mess MSU up pretty bad. And again, they are not expensive as a unit, so we'll sleep on them.
yeah, and how do you think the move of Zephyr to fast attack affected the Sisters of Battle?
So when it happened, I was Scary is an amazing human, by the way. You should check out his channel too. And he invited me to do like his live reading of the Codex, and I was just like the living meme who was like, "Oh my god!" Like every new rule, I was just so excited. And when he said Zephyr moved to fast attack, I was like, "Yes, finally, my elite slot is not in contention. I can build all the lists I ever wanted to." And then of course I start building lists, and I want Seraphim, and I want Dominions, and I want Zephyr, and I'm like, well, crap, I'm still back in the same spot. They just moved it to a different to a different place where I'm now strapped for slots. So look, I'm glad they moved. It lets me do more things in elites. It lets me run sacrosanct as many as I want, and that's amazing too. But maybe we just need battalions that have like more slots because we're more faithful or something. Then I'll be happy, Mitch. Something like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny that it went from, oh well, the lead slot is super crowded with Repentia, Celestians, and Zephyrum, to the fast attack slot being crowded. Do you think
Yep.
potentially regular Celestians got pushed out a little bit because you have the Sacrosancts now, you have the Repentia is still good and everything of that nature. Do you think you will still see plenty of Celestians on the table?
I don't see a great role for Celestians at the moment, which is sad because they've been bad forever. And then for a brief shining moment in late eighth, they were like decent, and I played the hell out of them because they weren't bad. And now, like, okay, so they used to have reroll all hits if they were near cannons. Now it's +1 to hit. That's a lot weaker, especially if you're moving with a multi-melt and it's only hitting on a 4. So that sucks. They used to have a stratagem, exceptional proficiency, which was reroll all hits and all wounds. Again, if you played Vol or seen a Gulliman, you know what reroll everything feels like. It's incredible. It just completely blows, it like doubles the output of the unit. It just blows the math apart. Um, but now exceptional proficiency is just +1 to hit. Now it's cool because Paragons are Celestians, so you can walk in from reserves with Paragons and be hitting on 2s your multi-melts. It's like I'm about that. But like losing the ability to just like have a ton of really accurate hits in melee with Celestians is gone. Um, they have the bodyguard rule, which is incredible, but also Sacrins have the bodyguard rule. And if they're hiding behind a wall, Sacrins are the ones you're much more scared to charge at, right? Because they have -1 to wound in combat, set to defend, they can hit better. They are a very scary thing to charge at. Regular Celestians will just get picked up. So I'm actually kind of sad they weren't like a Battle Sisters upgrade, and I could like run them as better troops, like they did with the Dark Eldar book. I think that was some misdesigned space, but oh, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong one day, and we can all find out why.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I mean, the big benefit to them before was that they had all of this going for them that you mentioned, and they were only 1 point more than a basic sister. So yeah, now looking at it, well, the Sacrosancts are just where I would rather be than the Celestians, and I guess if you had to move any unit, because you kind of touched upon this already, if you had to move any unit to the troop choice, would you move any unit to a troop choice, or would you leave the troop choice as is and just find different ways to enable sisters to take characters and things like that, kind of like they did already, without taking up unit slots?
Places have always had one troops choice since forever. It would have been nice for Celestians to be an upgrade, like I just said. Look, I think if you want another troops choice, you need a new model. No way. No way where Paragon's ever going to be troops.
Don't you jet?
Most of
Don't.
the other sisters.
I was gonna say,
I
don't
mean, none
dash
of
my
the
dreams.
Ecclesiarchy Battle Conclave stuff will be troops because they're all weirdos. I feel like there needs to be a new sculpt to have a new troops unit, and I think at this point the sisters are good. Like I'd be shocked if new units get revealed, like they did their two big waves. Sisters are in an amazing place. I just don't think like plenty of other books have one troops choice too, right? Broken Players, Custodian Guard. There's like a lot of books like that. I'm okay with it. I think Battle Sisters are decent. I don't think they're troops you hate to have, especially Argent Tribe with the Multi Melta. So they're fine. I don't know. I don't feel too bad about them.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I always like having a little bit ability to kind of go with, I guess with, for example, the AdMech and some other armies, is you have your basic troop choice, which is like a Skitarii, and then you have your elite troop choice, which is the Cataphren, for example. And so you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
build a very elite army or very kind of swarmy army. And I think that's something Sisters really can't do, but I guess you could always go into like Outrider detachments or Spearhead or something of that nature.
And you can't build a swarm like a 300 voice model army, but you can build like a 25 unit 100 model army if you want to with sisters and be very competitive with it. My good friend Tim Pinney over Florida Man 40K is doing that. And you might hurt your back bending over the table, moving so many models, so many places, but you can play the swarm if you really want to with the book.
What would that look like?
Five of everything. Five Zephyr, five Seraphim, five Dominions, five Sacrosancts, five Battle Sister squads, five Retributor squads. Literally the maximum MSU. No Vol, no Celestine, just cheapo Canonus Palatine. Take some blessings on them. Maybe a few rhinos, and that's about it. And just like be everywhere at once. It's a coolest concept. Like I said, the book is not solved. We are nowhere near a finished archetype. And just the fact this stuff keeps emerging every day is so cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one thing I found that I actually started getting was my previous guest on the previous episode number 3. He makes these little magnetic trays which can house up to 5 units or 10 units. So I found that when I move a block of 20 Skitarii, it's much easier moving 5 magnetized trays than it is to move 20 individual models. So that might be something for people to look into if they're interested in those kind of swarm builds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like I like playing with positioning. You can do silly things with five girls, or
Mhm.
really any size unit if you really want to. I think one of the things that separates a newer player from a more experienced player is knowledge, like how to move block and like how to, disrupt plans in combat and stuff. Being able to micro position, I enjoy, but I appreciate if you're playing a lot of units and you just don't want to deal, then the move trays can be nice for sure.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays move trays also come in different formations and positions, so there's different ways to kind of mix and match them, which
Yeah,
is what got me into them a little more. And you can always take them off the movement tray pretty easily, which is what I like about them.
for sure. For
Um,
sure.
and I guess s- just going on the theme of like different units and things like that, what do you think about the Imagifier? Do you think she's gotten better or worse, or where is she kind of now that some of her abilities have changed and we've seen the introduction of the Dogmata and other units of that nature?
So when the eighth book first came out, she was mandatory because everyone wanted to run Valor's Heart, and they wanted to have Ignore AP2, which is what the Valor's Heart action ability was if you brought an Imagifier. The Ignore AP1 or 2 with the Imagifier. Then we started to see less of them, but we'd still see like one of them in Bloody Rose because we liked the +1 strength buff. I think one of the advantages of the new book is that we have far less reliance on character bubbles than we ever did before. With a lot of our buffs moving to command phase buffs, it means you take them with you. You don't have to stay within 6 of the character. So there's a lot of reasons to play all over the table. Ninth edition also wants you playing all over the table. It does not want you dominating one objective with your whole army. and keeping up on points. That doesn't work. So I feel like the Magifier is just a reason to glom up when you don't want to win games and score points. Also, she lost a bit of her power in terms of the abilities that she hands out. So she doesn't give ignore AP anymore. She gives like a buff if you get hit with strength 3 weapons, which is like incredibly niche. Like an
Yes.
offensive buff against strength 3 weapons, which is like I was already wounding on 4s. Like I'm not scared of those. So like I think she took a pretty big nerf. A part of the nerf on the data sheet, but I think even more of the nerf came from the context that she lived in, the book and the edition. And I've not seen a lot of them. I mean, +1 strength is still a thing for a heavy Bloody Rose list. She might be a great caddy for that relic you need too if you're playing really light on characters. Maybe. But so far, I haven't seen a list where I'm like, man, that is a really good choice for that list yet.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And I just wanted to check what the rule actually was because I didn't remember what Stoic did anymore either, and that's usually the one that I saw people running her for in Valor's Heart.
Yeah.
And what it does is each time an attack with a strength characteristic of 3 or less is made against the unit, subtract 1 from that attack's wound roll.
Yeah. Okay. So like strength 3 wounds you on 5s. I mean, like witches will be sad, I guess. Is anti-witch tech?
Yeah, I mean, but there's so many
Maybe.
ways of buffing strength. Like, I mean, Vanguard have a strength 3 weapon, but it auto wounds, so
Witches can also drugs to strength 4, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it has a few different
yeah.
ways of getting to strength 4, which is the big thing. Yeah, I just don't see that being particularly interesting or good, to be
Even ignore AP1 was situational. If you weren't Valor's Heart, because there's not that much AP1 weaponry out there. Making strength 3 worse is very, very situational. Most of the things that want to kill you with strength 3, like you say, have a way to buff out of strength 3 or past strength 3. I don't see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's
Like I
kind of
said, she wants you to play in a ball. If you do that, you will lose. You don't want to lose, so that kind of makes her not amazing, in my opinion.
yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I was surprised by the changes they made to her because I figured the -1 to AP wouldn't go away, or I guess ignore AP1, ignore AP2. But yeah, it's unfortunate. She's kind of a cool model, but I don't think she sees much of a role currently at the time. Maybe for the +1 strength. Um,
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Who
yeah.
knows? There could be a list that just like run a million Battle Sisters and now they're strength 4. Who knows?
Yeah. What about the new Castigator?
I like it more than I think the internet tells me I'm supposed to. That's my take on the Castigator. I I think you don't run 3 because that's a meme, and then chicken walkers will just blow you off the table, and the AdMech player collects their free win. I think that's a terrible idea. But sisters don't have a lot of range shooting, um, and so what that means is your opponent can kind of play dishonest with you, like they can cheat out, live in the open, be a pain in the butt because they know you have to get really close to use your guns or punch them. Having a weapon which has 48 or 72 range if it's the Cascade battle cannon is means they can't cheat off you quite so badly, even if you won't like do monster damage, which it does good damage, but it doesn't have access to easy reroll, so not monster damage. But even the ability to do good damage or maybe spike up for really good damage on some hot rolls means your opponent has to respect your game a little bit more and kind of force them to come closer to you than otherwise might. And when your opponents get close to the Sororitas, they get purged. So, like, kind of hurting your opponent the right way, making them play honest is very valuable. Just that one Castigator will force them to play that way. That being said, 3 Heavy Bolter Mortifiers also racks up fairly favorably compared to a Castigator. So, I don't know, but I think if you put one in a list to play that role, I would not object. Anywhere near as much as I think a lot of the internet feels about the Castigator and the zeitgeist more generally.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I kind of saw it and I was a little underwhelmed by it, but I get what you're saying in that sense. I guess, would you ever really choose the Castigator over, say, an Exorcist that can ignore line of sight?
I mean, it can ignore line of sight for 2 CP. This is a high price to pay. Also, the Exodus is 6 shots for its good gun, and it's got like another gun which is like 3d6. It's blast, so it's like cute into hordes. But like 6 shots is quite unreliable. The Cascade has average 17 shots, which is a lot more likelihood of getting your hits in down range. Like it's easy to spike 6 shots into nothing. You know, couple of bad hits, couple of bad wounds, they make a save. It's like, oh, I didn't do anything. And I don't want to pay 2 CP to not do anything. But yeah, I think the Castigator is probably better than the Exorcist. Like I said, Mortifier is where I look for my range firepower instead of a Castigator. I would say I've had the good fortune to talk with some very, very good at guard players. So I've managed to talk to Treadhead Extraordinaires, Brandon Grant, who came onto our show, and Mitch Pelham, who's a friend. And both of them, when I told them I thought my original negative thought of the Cascade, were like, "Are you joking? Can I tell you what we take in the Lemon Russ and what we pay for it and how much value we get out of it? And you're telling me you can't take a chassis with more shots for less points and access to miracles and not want it? You're an idiot." So when smart people call me an idiot, it makes me change my perspective a little bit. They were nicer than that. That's the Mitch version of what they told me.
Yeah, but they're also guards, so they get like 200 different tanks in a list compared to like most other armies that have like two.
160 is not too crazy though. It's not cheap, but it's not going to break the bank. Like I said, losing one of them is not going to make you lose a game. You know,
Yeah, no, that's true.
if it's bad in the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them. I guess you've sold me on it more than I was on it before.
I would say if your hardest match is AdMech and they are dead weight into AdMech, then you should reconsider, right? Because you want to kind of tech to your hardest matchup. But if AdMech drop a little in the meta, they don't just auto detonate you and then also be an incredibly uphill fight. Okay, fine. But outside of this very tight meta consideration, I think they have some real juice, and I would absolutely put them on the table. I mean, I'm going to get at least one or two and just see how they play, especially if the meta shifts away from AdMech.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, I can see the valid argument behind it. I'm still not the biggest fan of it, but I also just love mortifiers, so.
I mean, so we, Sister 40K being the world's most each podcast, we did a 3-episode miniseries on just mortifiers. So you have friends in that opinion on our show.
I mean, they're crazy. You get 2 of them per box, which I just don't understand how Games Workshop allowed that, considering you get 1 chicken walker for the same price. And they just do everything. They're melee, they're ranged, they're tough and
Oh, I know.
resilient.
I know. You come up close and kill them in melee, they'll kill you back anyway because they're mad about it. Ugh, I love them so much.
Yeah, and they're just beautiful models as a whole, in my opinion. But yeah, I guess going on the theme of tanks, what about the Immolator? Where do you kind of sit on that one?
Why does Games Workshop make gorgeous stained glass battle tanks? The most absurd, ridiculous, wonderful, incredible 40K thing there is the stained glass battle tank. And then price it where I cannot, in good conscience, put one in my list. Makes me upset. It's like it was barely hanging on in the old book when it didn't have core and it could get rerolls. At 120 points, 125 points. They dropped it to 120 points. Basically, they didn't change the price effectively. They took away all access to rerolls by virtue of introducing core into the book, and they didn't drop the points consequently. It's real hard to justify. And then they made the Immolation Flamer more expensive. That got more expensive. Like, what? No one was taking it. I think there's one really good sister player, GW, who loves Immolators and was just beating the crap out of the rules writer with him over and over and over again. And that rules writer was like, "I'll show you. The pen is mightier than the flamer." I can't explain it otherwise.
Yeah, I can see
Sorry,
that.
Immolator.
I mean, I'm with you on that one 100%. I thought the Bolter one was maybe okay before, and now I feel like it's been edged out a little bit. But speaking of core, do you think core has been positive for the game as a whole, or do you think it's been kind of a dud?
I am mixed in this. So here's what I hated. One of my least favorite games of 8th edition of all time was when I went into triple repulsor executioner as Iron Hands, and they had like a bunch of planes too. Like they sat on the back line and they shot me with 18 billion shots, somehow re-rolling everything, and everything died. And I walked at them and everything died. And like lists like that definitely kept coming back in the meta, like recurring. They'd be like, "Oh, oops." Like there's a period of time where Eldar were like, "Oops, we shoot like crazy too now," because I think Colin Sherman from Best in Faction podcast figured out they're bonkers at shooting if you did it right. And so like, oops, Seldar was like oppressive. And so taking away the opportunity for vehicles to be oops oppressive, I think is good for the game. Because oppressive shooting is the worst kind of oppressive because there's little you can do about it. And of course, AdMech. Um, so core as a mechanism to do that was successful. Were there other mechanisms to do it other than core? Probably. You could put vehicle exclusions on your Rs, for example. And I think on balance, having another sub, in the Venn diagram of your army, adding another circle to your Venn diagram just kind of adds confusion in a way. Also, like a lot of sisters, you like why are arcoflagellants core? I don't understand. They're literally brainwashed criminals. They have nothing to do with the sororitas. They're like brought on by the preacher who's like, look at this toy that I have. It kills things. Like, why is that core? I feel like it's been very consistently applied. Um, I wish that Games Workshop had fixed the oops oppressive tank in a different way. But I appreciate where they were trying to go with it. Not my preference.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, it's definitely the right idea, but the wrong execution.
And then your book has like cult, and then it has
Oh,
Guitari, and then
yeah.
it has core. You have like infinite circles in your Venn diagram. So I
Yeah.
it, I don't think most players want to cheat, but I don't like a rule set built in a way where people are cheating all the time by accident. And I feel like that's encouraged by the rule set.
I'm with you on that. I mean, the worst thing about I think the some of the ninth edition stuff is the increase in bookkeeping, especially when it wasn't necessary. Um, why do the Castellans, for example, have two weapons that have almost the same name but different stat profiles, whereas before
Oh,
they
I
didn't?
know.
It's like,
I know. Yeah.
like just make it consistent. Same thing again. I always advocate for give things keywords, so any instance of feel no pain should say feel no pain in it or something like that, because there's always confusion about when certain things proc. But I do agree with you. Core does have a function, but I think they didn't really apply it in such a way that made sense.
If
And
you want to speak of differentiating units, like you mentioned, having like the two weapons are exactly the same. Uh, Props to the new Sisters book. The Mortifier and the Penitent engine in the old book, like the Mortifier was just like obviously better, and like why is the Penitent engine a thing? Like it moves seven instead of nine. It just like has worse guns. Like it just didn't have anything better about it. They're actually quite different now in the new book. And I am loving it. So that I think was a really good example of differentiation in the new book compared to the old book. Something to look at. They both have very different roles now.
hmm, what would you say? What would you say changed about the Pennant engine? I haven't really gone to that part of the book myself.
Yeah, so mortifiers are roughly the same. They went to 8-inch move, and penitents went to an 8-inch move. So now the two things that look identical move the same speed, which is, another chance to not cheat by accident. Uh, Penitent engines, they got a little bit weaker on the flails, but they also gain zealots. They reroll all their hits, so they still hit about as many times as they used to. So they still punch just as hard, strength 5 instead of 6, but otherwise just as hard. Um, and they have a 5-up feel no pain now, which is really good. It makes them shockingly durable. Like they'll just randomly eat a last cannon or two and still be around to soak a third one. Like that's very efficient in terms of your defenses. So they shoot really well with their two heavy bolters, and then if you get close, you get punched. Penitent engines, and again, lost advance and charge because the whole army lost advance and charge. Because before you could run them up the board, advance, shoot, and then charge something because you had the stratagem to do so, and they would just cause a big mess. But now they can't advance a charge, and they want to kind of stand back and shoot. They're more durable, so they can be a fire base. Penitents, though, on their data sheet get advance and charge, and so they went from move 7 to move 8. Move 8 plus advance and charge. They're fast. They're very fast. So like now one is like, and they have a 5 invulnerable too, or 5 up feel no pain too. So one of them got fast and like in your face, and the other got like hang back and shoot. So it's much more clear which one is which now, and they both have a purpose. They both have a job to do in life. So that's pretty cool.
That is actually really cool. I mean, like you said before, I always wondered when anyone would play Penitent engines, and there was one instance I saw where someone made use of the Penitent engine that was pretty
Yeah.
creative, and that was just Mortifier
Um,
squads 4 through 6.
Yeah, exactly. Playing the meme list, right? I want 24 engines, damn it, not a mere 12.
Yeah.
Um, my army is one of penitence. I would say the cleansing flame stratagem, which is the max hits on a flamers for your squad. It's a 2 command point stratagem that is now, it used to be Evan Chalice locked, now it's whole army wide. That works on anything Ministorum. So you can charge up like an idiot with four penitent engines, each of which have 2 heavy flamers, and if you want, you can get 48 hits for 2 command points at strength 6 AP 1. That will do work on a lot of things in the game.
It does sound pretty good, actually. I remember that ability, and it seemed pretty good. I was like, maybe even Chalice can do something, because I remember it was what Even Chalice had Flamers, Sacred Rose had Bolters, and then
Kind of,
someone
yeah,
else had
yeah.
Melt, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it was really a melt order. It was a bit of a mess, the old book,
Yeah.
honestly. But being able to hit 48, get 48 hits with your heavy flamers, and you can do that out of strategic reserves too. You know, the pennant then pop out, absolutely smoke something, and then are like, "We're a threat. Would you like to shoot us?" Is like pretty neat.
Yeah, it definitely sounds great. So I guess what would you say about Sacred Rites? Because those changed up a little bit from what I remember.
Yeah, at first I was pretty underwhelmed because the best three remain the best three. So the passion is basically if you hit on a 6, you get an additional hit. It's incredible. With full rerolls, it's even more incredible. Like for example, Repentia go from hitting 75% of the time to 100% of your attacks become hits with exploding sixes and full rerolls. So like the math on it is really, really good. Unchanged, still top dog. Then there was +1 advance to charge with Hand of the Emperor. That is unchanged, still really good. Aegis of the Emperor, which was the one which allows you to do better denies, changed a lot, but it hasn't changed in that if you're up against a Psyker heavy army that wants to smite you, you will take it. So it's changed in rules, but it serves the same function. You pick it the same way. And then the other three, no one ever cared. And unfortunately, the other three still probably no one ever cares,
Hmm.
which makes me a little disappointed. I, there are ways to throw rights around that weren't there before. So there's one of the hymns that the new priests have where you can apply a right to a unit. There's a relic you can give a superior. You know, kind of as Space Marines have like, you know, sergeant relics. There's superior relics now, which allow you to put 2 rights on a unit. So maybe if you have a particular shooting unit, you put the shooting right on it. Or you're running most shooting, you put the combat rights on that one combat unit. So there's some spice there. Agatha Dolan allows you to take all 6 rights once per game, which is goofy and probably not good. Again, she's not a good model. Um, but by and large, I feel like there was a lot of design space here to be explored, and I would love to see those other 3 get brought up to that same power level. Largely, I don't think that happened. And with so many spicy ways to play with rights, I wish they were actually just better intrinsically. So, a bit of a miss in the book, I think.
Do you think there's ever a list build or a situation which you would randomly generate the rights, or do you think it's too risky?
No, never. Like, it was dumb in the old book, I think. Smart people disagree with me, but a lot of smart people agreed with me. I thought it was dumb in the old book. Now in the new book, Evan Chalice can take 2 rights instead of 1 for all Evan Chalice units. Like I said, Blessings of Sebastian Thor is the relic that lets you give a single unit with a superior 2 rights of your choosing. Can be the same or different, but 2 rights of your choosing. And then there's a hymn that lets you give a sacred right. If you want more than 1 right, you can do that. Like in the list building step or the gameplay step. Like you don't need to roll. And rolling just says like half of them are bad. Like if you're not playing a Psyker army, 4 of them are weak. Like you're gonna take a 33% chance to get a good one by rolling. It just don't feel good.
Hey, some
Don't feel
people
good at
like
all
to
to
live
me.
dangerously.
Yeah, there's whole factions for that. They're called every other faction in the game. Sisters don't live dangerously. We live faithfully. If you need a roll to work, you can just make it work. We're the ones with miracle dice. Don't roll. You don't have to, people.
Uh,
Believe.
what
Believe instead.
if what if they found a way to make it so you can use miracle dice to generate Well, I guess it's just Ebon Chalice picking two different rights.
Yeah, exactly. Evan Chalice already does it. Just pick two. You're fine. You have a pick two. It's right there. And Evan Chalice has the mortal wounds on Flamer stratagem. And Evan Chalice has like a bonkers start the game with a 6 and CP regen and a 5-up Warlord trait. Like there's lots of reasons to be Evan Chalice. Just do that if you're really, really hot for rights. Or take Agatha Dolan, who lets you give all the rights within a 6 inch aura because reasons.
Yeah, that just never made sense to me. And what kind of situation would you want all six rights in a 6-inch bubble for one turn? I believe, correct?
Yep, she's not in my list either.
I just had to think about like what was the design parameter of that. Like maybe if it was like an army wide for one turn, or like create a permanent bubble or something. But I just yeah.
My mental model is like maybe the rights were better at one point in the design process, and then they like forgot to update her data sheet when they made rights bad again, or made some of the rights bad again, and they just like didn't fix it. I don't know.
Yeah, fair
I don't know,
enough.
man.
I mean, they've forgotten a lot of things in the past, so
Yeah.
the amount of mistakes that come out in some of these books is kind of once again makes me wish they did a little more digital than hard printed. But what can you really do about
To be
that?
clear, the book is incredible. Blessings are so flavorful and fluffy and cool, and hymns are a cool, cool new mechanic we have. There's so many cool things in the book too. 100%. Just writes carried over from the old book, a little bit too much like it. Meh is my take in onomatopoeia form.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it's a nice extra ability, I guess. Again, the sisters have so many special rules that kind of apply to a vast majority of their army. I guess they had to sacrifice a few here
Yep.
and there. Um, Blessings are pretty interesting. I'm guessing most new books are going to have some version of a blessing of some sort, considering Admech have their holy orders, Necrons have
Yeah.
Arcana, etc.,
Yep.
etc. Um, what would you say? Where would you say the power rating on the blessings for sisters is?
There's some real good ones in there, man. Word of the Emperor, the one that was revealed on Warhammer Community, that is a 3-inch fight last aura, and so all of them have a persistent ability and a one-time effect. So the persistent fight last and a one-time effect of strip invulns is really, really good. Like situationally good, but in the situations you want it, it's just bonkers. Um, Rapture's Blows, I think, is actually my favorite one, though. It's criminally undercosted for what it does. It makes the character holding it punch better for the passive effect. It's like +1 damage and some other buffs. So, like, it makes some very scary punching. +1 attack, I think. But its miraculous ability says if you wound on a 6, they take a mortal. There are ways to get rerolls in this book. Like, a fully buffed out Bloody Rose Zephyrin 10 girl squad, if you want to run that, can do like 17 or 18 mortals on average.
Oh, Jesus.
Um, or or you can like dogpile a unit with, tag them with the fight last from Word of the Emperor, then tag them with Rapturous Blows, and like all your random Bloody Rose Battle Sisters just beating the crap out of this guy and hand him 10 mortals. That's a really nice thing to have in your back pocket. And I think those two are my favorite. I also like the defensive ones. One is a one-time miraculous ability of -1 to hit. The other is a one-time miraculous ability of turning off rerolls within the range of it. Uh, right now, the game's very killy, but I can imagine in a world where there's good Tau or good Orcs, -1 to hit is really, really good, or good Guard, because obviously going from a 4 to 5 is great for us to hit them. Turning off rerolls is excellent. I'm not shocked when I see those in lists either. Those also feel good, especially with Sacristans.
Interesting. What would you say is kind of the right amount of blessings in a list?
0 or 2.
0 2.
Uh, 0 if you're taking Vol and Celestine for your characters. By the way, Valentine, as we're calling them, like Vol and Celestine together. The Valentine pairing is ridiculous, and you should try it. It's incredible. Like mixing the High Lord with the Queen is just so, so good. But if you're not taking them, because they're also 465 points for the pair, take a Canoness and a Palatine for your battalion, give one blessing to each of them, and that's why I say 0 or 2.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. And yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
2 is kind of like the sweet spot. Same thing with holy orders. Usually it's like 1 to 2. I rarely see people use all 4.
Yep.
Um, Which is interesting because we do get a command point reduction on ours, and we're kind of a command point hungry army, so I could have seen a
Yeah.
world where all four were good, but the points do add up pretty quick once 150 of your army or something becomes holy orders. It kind of gets out of hand.
Well,
Um,
and you can also only use once per battle round. So if you've got more than two, it's like, well, you've always got to be using one every battle round. And are you always going to want to use one every battle round? Probably not, right? You take away your optionality. And also, Rapture's Blows and Word of the Emperor, like I said, go together like peanut butter and jelly, or like, Bolter and Flamer, because one makes them fight last, and the other one, when you dogpile, you do mortals to them with all of your little units. This is a very good pairing.
yeah, definitely. Um, I guess one character we haven't really mentioned. It seems like we've been touching on all the other ones. Where do you think the Triumph of Saint Catherine stands right now? Because she used to be a huge popular unit that was in a lot of lists. And I haven't, again, it's early in the meta. There's only been like three sister lists placing in the top four, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen her pop up in any of them yet.
Community consensus and good player consensus is that it got a pretty big nerf. She only gives you one miracle die per battle round instead of two, because you used to be one per player turn. Um, she she got a little better in that she can get bodyguard protection now, which is nice. And she has Lookout Sir, so she can be protected by the normal character protection rules, which is really nice. She also took a points hike. Um, and she no longer allows you to use multiple acts of faith around her. So she used to be able to hand out a freebie extra act of faith per turn. So the same unit could use two, or you could use a second one if the first unit did. Also, a lot of her R abilities got locked to core and character, whereas before they work on vehicles. I can tell you, just like handing out Miracle Dice sixes so that tanks would auto pass saves was really neat in the old book. So I think people say she's got a buff, and I think or a nerf, and I think that's correct. However, said this before, we have a secondary where we can score 12 points for using Miracle Dice. We may be sleeping on the fact that that one 220-point model, who still brings a lot of utility, might also give you an easy way to just score a 12-point secondary. And again, that is a game warping thing to have. Just go ask any Dark Angels player what it's like to just score free secondaries without any work. It's possible that we're all undervaluing her for that reason alone. I don't know. We will see.
Fair enough. She's definitely a beautiful model, and yeah, I think a lot of these kind of support characters were a little bit of a casualty of the core mechanic and things of that
Yep.
nature. I mean, Call definitely took a big hit, in more ways than one, which was surprising. But it seems like she's kind of in that same boat, though she survived her hit a little bit better. So I guess is there anything that we kind of haven't covered yet that you wanted to cover or wanted to mention?
Um, Definitely try out the hymns. There are some very cool characters now. Like we talked about, the Dialogus has exit hymns. The Dogmata is excellent. You can kind of build her to be smashy punchy, or you can build her to be a buff bot. Definitely give her a spin. She seems like she's potentially very, very strong. Also, being able to give Obsec to Zephyr, who then go off on adventures, is very, very strong. Um, Apart from that, no, I think we covered a lot of what's going on in the new book and a lot of what has me excited right now.
Excellent. And you have any, I guess, last minute tips, something that you think a lot of people are maybe overlooking?
My last tip would be to say the book is not solved. And I've said this a few times, but I'm going to say it again. The book is not solved, nowhere near it. Just because one list worked well does not mean another list will not. Just because you have an idea that no one else has had does not mean it's automatically bad. Just because you see a lot of Argent Shroud and Bloody Rose does not mean that Sacred Rose or Ebon Chalice or even our Martyred Lady might actually be the long-term plays. Try stuff, put it on the table, go join a community, go talk to new friends in that new community, because Warhammer at the end of the day is a social activity. Go find friends online, find them in person, test out your ideas, share them with people. We're all figuring this thing out together. We'd love to have you join us if you're not in the community already. Um, yeah, and roll some dice and have a good time. Sisters are an incredible faction now. It's a good time to be a Sisters player. So if you're not one already, what are you waiting for? Come join us.
And then two final questions. The first one being, what is your favorite model, both in the Sisters range and outside of the Sisters range?
My favorite model in the Sisters range remains the new Celestine because my God, just what a pose. She's just so inspiring and dominant on the tabletop. And now finally, her data sheet punches as hard as she looks and is as tough as she looks. Like you shouldn't be able to kill an angel very easily, and you super can't now. So I still love the Celestine model. I think Vol is a close second, but Celestine just tough to beat. Uh, Outside of the sisters, my favorite model. See, you've given me a lot of choices now. I'll go in a different direction than probably what people expect. One of my favorite all-time models of any range is the Trigon. Giant monster burrowing snake bug. Just is everything that I want to see on the tabletop against me. And of course, it's hot garbage, and so you don't. But hopefully, it's good in the new book because I want to see that thing. I want to be terrified of it. It's enormous and it's gorgeous and it's beautiful and I love it. So there you go.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, Tyranids have some really amazing models, so that's one of the ones I would probably say is one of my favorite ones out of the Tyranids as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I guess the final question would be, where can people find you, and what's your? Well, I guess let's just rephrase it. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So if you just listen to 2 hours of content and you're like, man, I wish I had tens of hours of content on sisters. I'm nowhere near slaked in my thirst for delicious, delicious sister talking. You can come find us, Sister Act 40K. Just search your favorite podcast app for Sister Act 40K. You'll almost certainly find us. We are a monofaction podcast. This is all that we do. A lot of it's competitive, but also some lore stuff, also some hobby stuff. Like I said, we had Black Library authors, we've had major winners, we've had LVO champs, we've had everyone in between. It's a good time. We have a lot of laughs. Rob and I like to joke that we're like the laugh track for good sisters players to come on. It's a fun time. And if you want to find us and many other good sisters players, there's a Sister Battle Discord out there. Just come find me online and bug me for a link. It's invite only, but they hand them out like candy. So over 1,000 people in it. Really great community to find people. Help you get better at the faction too. I'm there. A lot of people are there. So if you want to hear me talk, go to 640K. If you want to talk openly with a lot of good players and also bad players who run podcasts, go find that Sisters Discord. It's the Sisters Battle Discord. It's really, really good. I'm there all the time.
Excellent. I'll definitely put a link in the description to your Sisters Act podcast because I think it's something that more people should listen to. I definitely listened to it when I was starting out learning about the sisters.
Thank you.
And yeah, you guys do some awesome content there. You bring on a lot of cool
Yeah, I
guests as
appreciate it.
well who have a very diverse perspective. But yeah, thank you for coming on so much. Hopefully, we can do this again sometime. And don't be a stranger.
Yes, thank you. Cheers, and good luck with your sister series. Your content is amazing and wonderful, and really, really good for newer players. So if for whatever reason the first time you're hearing of Tech Priest is now, you should go check out that catalog. There's a lot of really good beginner getting started stuff to help kind of orient you in this crazy world of Warhammer that we all live and love. So really appreciate your stuff too, friend. Thank you for having
Awesome.
me on your show too. It's been a pleasure and a joy. And you're very good at asking questions. Lots of really interesting ones that had to make me like think and stuff, which I guess I liked.
Thank you. If I can accomplish getting people to think, then I've done my job successfully.
Fair enough.
Okay.